Hey everyone, I'm here with Andrew Warner, the great founder of Mixergy.com, and today I'm going to be interviewing him on how you can actually interview other celebrities in your niche and become the authority and get a ton of traffic for it. So, Andrew, thanks for letting me interview you.
Cool. It's great to have it turned around here. Usually I'm the one who just does interviews, and I'm the one who's begging you to do an interview with me. Not begging, you never make me beg, but I say, Neil, come do an interview with me because I need a traffic boost. Or Neil, come do an interview with me because there's something I want to learn and I don't want to waste an hour of your time in a one-on-one call. If you do an interview, it'll be productive for both of us.
There you go, and then you can release it to your audience to get more traffic,
Right,
right?
right. So it's great for me to be able to say thank you by being on this side of the interview with you.
Awesome, no worries. So I want to first get started off by asking you, what's the story behind Mixergy, right? How did it start? What was the concept behind it? And why do you continually do it day in and day out?
Well, there are a couple of reasons. First, I always saw these great entrepreneurs and I'd read their stories in magazines and it would take up maybe a page or two where they'd say, and this guy worked really, really hard and he built a great company. And now that he has this great company, look at how much fun he's having, going to Vail and flying on these planes. And I go, whoa, hang on a second. Somewhere between Vail and he worked really hard, or in that period where he worked really hard, is something interesting, something that I can learn from and use. I want to do that. I mean, I want to learn. Pause and dig into that section. So I said, if they're not going to do it, I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to find out step by step. Not that he worked hard, but really, how do you get his first customer? How do you get his second customer? What do you do after that? And so on. The second reason is that it's they're people that I want to get to know. I want to hear their stories, but I also want to get to know them. And I found that now when I was living in Argentina and I met up with someone who I interviewed, who I admired his business, I wanted to get to know him. We did an interview, and then I lived in Argentina, really the middle of nowhere as far as much of the world is concerned. And there I was getting to know an entrepreneur who I interviewed. It's wonderful. It's much better than going to a networking event and hoping you get to bump into someone great. Here, I smack I just spend an hour with someone who's really great. We really get to connect and build long relationships.
And you also ran into Young Lee, who is one of the head biz dev guys at Amazon too, right down there?
That's right. And we were talking about how cheap you guys were and about the behind the scenes stuff at work. It's it's great. Now we had a bunch of friends in common. He worked for someone who I interviewed. He knew you. It builds up these great connections.
Yeah, that's crazy stuff. So going on to the next question, when you're interviewing people, what strategy you use to build authority and get traffic to your site?
Build authority for myself.
Yes, build authority for yourself and for your site and business, right? So that way you can get more traffic to it.
Okay. I'm a big note taker. I want to make sure that I don't give your audience just a bunch of blah, 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 blah. I want to give them as much as possible. So you want authority for me and authority for my site, and then we talk about traffic. So here's what I do. People always ask me, why do you do videos? And the reason is this. When I used to just do text-based interviews or audio-based interviews, people would just say, Andrew got to interview great people. When I do video, I put my face right next to Seth Godin's face. I don't have to say I'm an authority anymore. The fact that they're looking at both of us at the same time says Seth trusts Andrew, Seth Godin, who a lot of people in my audience and a lot of people out in the business world admire. He trusts Andrew. He's standing right there with Andrew. I'm staring at both of them for an hour here, or maybe I have them in the background and every once in a while I look at them. Regardless, the authority just starts to accumulate to me. The second thing that I do is, if you go to Mixergy.com at any time, no matter what the site looks like, and we go through lots of different iterations, by the time people watch this, it could be on a whole new design. One of the first things you see is faces of some of the biggest names that I've interviewed, and the logos of the companies that I've interviewed. Right away, you say, this is an authoritative site. Look at all these people who are associated with the website. I did a lot of sessions with entrepreneurs about how they use copywriting or ads to communicate authority. Just putting logos on a website often creates authority. But when there's a real connection, when it's like these two people have been on the site together, Andrew and this person who I admire, it's just a natural for people to say, I trust this site. By the way, I did an interview with a copywriter once who said, you don't even have to do work with these companies if you want to put the logos up on your website. If you want to just increase conversion, you say things like, will do work with companies like, and you put the big logos, or will appear, or will appear in newspapers like the New York Times, the Washington Post, etc. He's just doing like A/B tests to see, does it matter what the connection is to the logos, or are people just seeing logos? How about will never appear on? He should probably test this. Will never appear on Wall Street Journal, New York Times, etc. Just the fact that you show those logos increases authority. So I'm not suggesting that people do that. What I am saying though is that
So you're
that
saying
works.
when you put will be in Wall Street Journal, you actually got more authority and more conversions and sales and traffic.
Exactly. I'm not suggesting that people start to mislead their audiences. What I'm saying is that having those big names has a lot to do with the attention that you get from the audience that looks at them, from the credibility that they give you, and from just the fact that they will pause for a minute and say, I recognize that. I'm going to take a look at the rest of the page. So that's how I get authority for myself, get authority for the site. And then the third thing you asked me is traffic. How do I get traffic? And I learned this actually from shoot, why can't I come? It'll come to me. One of the great things about doing interviews is I get to talk to the guests afterwards, and I say to them, well, I'm wrestling with how do I make money with my site? And they'll spend some time giving me some help because they got my audience, and they hopefully a lot of people from my audience went to their sites and got to know them. And also because, you spend an hour with someone, there's a bond that comes. And so I've been really lucky that they've been helping me. Chris Winfield is the guy who I called up. I said, I did an interview with you, Chris, about how you get a lot of traffic. I'm not getting enough traffic for my interviews. What do I do? And Chris says, I know your site because I was obviously interviewed there and I spent an hour there and then another few hours because people kept linking on it on Twitter. I thought about it. Here's what you do. And he gave me a bunch of suggestions. And here's the best thing that he told me. He said at the end of an interview, you follow up with the guest who you interviewed and you just ask them to tweet. You just ask them to link on their homepage. And I thought about it. I said, of course, when people ask me to tweet after I've been on their site, of course I do. But if they don't, I say, I'm on the site. I'm a little embarrassed. Maybe my voice didn't come across well. Maybe my collar's not right underneath this vest. I don't know. Maybe the fact that I'm wearing a vest is a dorky thing. I'm not going to just mention it. It's too also arrogant for me to do it. But if they email me and they say, tweet it out, link to it, do something, I'll do it, of course. So that's the best suggestion that he gave me. And I got tons of suggestions for traffic. I can go on all day about it, but you're the interviewer. I'll let you guide me to what you think is useful for the person who's watching us now.
So what you ended up doing is after every interview you did, you actually ask the person to either link to it from their website, maybe do an email blast if they have an email newsletter or RSS subscribers if they have a blog or post on it, and also tweet about it, maybe share it on Facebook, Google Plus, whatever social media accounts they had, and it worked. It drove traffic, I'm assuming,
Yep.
right, based off the results.
Absolutely.
So cool. So the thing with you and interviews are is you interview entrepreneurs, and the chances are these entrepreneurs have websites. What happens if I'm, say, let's say, a carpet cleaning company? How would I actually go about and interview people for, let's say, carpet cleaning? And would the same model actually work?
It absolutely work. What you have to do is think about, first of all, who's related to you, who has traffic and is interested and is interesting to your audience. So you might think, well, Martha. Well, I'll come to that in a second. Let me hold up on that. You start to think, well, there's someone who's into home ownership, or there's someone who's like a mommy blogger who's got a lot of traffic, and mommy bloggers talk to other mommies, and they talk to other people with families. I'm going to go and interview her about how she keeps her house clean, or in fact, it wouldn't necessarily even be about carpet cleaning. It would just be about what her life is like, and think about ways of spinning it for my audience. So first I'd have to think, who's the audience I'm targeting? Maybe it would just be families with houses, or maybe it would be, actually, that's probably, if I was a carpet cleaner, I would just say, I'm going to do a show for families, like little things around the house that people would care about. And then I'd say the mommy blogger has traffic. I'm going to go and do an interview with her. The daddy blogger has traffic. I'm going to go do an interview with him. The person who has a big Twitter following who talks about organic gardening in the backyard, that's related to home, to home and garden. I'm going to do an interview with him. And with every one of them, I'd ask them to tweet or to link back. And today, there are lots of people who have followings. It's not just entrepreneurs who have followings. In fact, entrepreneurs are often too busy to build up followings, but it's the mommies and the daddies and the everyday Joes who have time and patience and an interest in creating websites about their passions. And they can't talk about themselves all day. They can't say, look, I'm great, I'm great, I'm great. But if they do an interview with someone, the fact that they've done an interview means that they have some level of, of authority, of people caring about them. And through the interview, they get to say, I'm great. And an interview is a really easy thing for people to embed on their site. So you do an interview with them, you let them embed it on their site, and of course they're going to link back and they're going to give you the link and they're going to give you the traffic.
So that actually brings me up to a question. When you're doing the interview and you're saying it's easy to embed on the site, do you recommend using YouTube to or host the videos on YouTube or any other video sharing sites or your own custom player, or what do you recommend?
I think YouTube is great, especially now that they allow longer form video. I personally, and they're business partners of mine, but I love them. I use Wistia, and the reason I use Wistia is I want to know if I show a short video, at what point do people drop off? Then it gives Wistia is all about video hosting and traffic information. So I get to see what point do people stop paying attention. When I ask a question about traffic, are they paying more attention? If I ask a question about their wives and their families and take an interest in the bookcase over their shoulder or the glasses that they're wearing, do they start to fast forward through it, or do they just cancel and stop watching the video altogether? Wistia gives me that kind of data. YouTube gives you exposure.
That's awesome because it tells you, hey, you should be doing X, Y, and Z, right, to improve the quality of your interviews or get more engagement, and if more people end up watching it, they're going to be more likely to tweet it out, embed it on their sites, link to it, so forth, so on. And I'm assuming Wistia has all the capabilities of YouTube when it comes to embeds and stuff like that as well, correct?
Yep. They, in fact, will, in addition to the embed, YouTube only lets you embed the video. In addition to that, what they do is they let you embed the video with a tweet button attached to it and all the other stuff, the Facebook, I think it's even email. And so the beauty of that is that it allows people to tweet your stuff, and it allows you to let them forward or embed a tweetable video. Also, at the end of YouTube videos, often people have those related content. You don't want to deal with that. You want people focusing just on your video.
Yeah, and send them to more of your videos versus other YouTube videos.
Yeah.
So another question I had for you is, you're a successful entrepreneur. A lot of people may not know. I think your story is out there now. For your first company, how much was it doing in profit per year? It was well into the millions.
Yeah, it was over $30 million in sales.
But the profit was still high, right?
Yeah, but it was less than that.
It was less than that? What was it? The numbers out there.
You know what? I don't know the number that's out there. I forget what it was. I know that it was strong.
Yeah, it was somewhere in the 8 figures.
Yeah, it was.
And the best part about it was Ernst & Young audited report, so you knew it was actually true.
Yeah. Now, by the way, for a long time, I never wanted to show that. I credit you even right now on my About page with being the person who pushed me to be open about myself. I'm not someone who's open about myself. I hate to reveal my own numbers, and that's the benefit of doing an interview. I don't have to force myself to be open. I can let other people be open.
Force it out of you.
But you pushed me to do it, and I'm so glad that you did. When I was open about what I did before, of my past business, when I was even open about my numbers, it helped me feel a sense of relief that, the stuff that I thought was secret wasn't such a big deal, and it helped me really bond with my audience.
Yeah, and the thing is you didn't actually reveal those numbers when you first started Mixergy, right? And once people knew about it, and after you ran Mixergy for a while, you became a lot more well-known, right? But when you started off, were you well-known in the space when you were requesting?
Not at all. I was such a nobody, and intentionally, when I built up that company that you're talking about, I intentionally didn't want anyone to know about me. I was afraid that competitors would steal my ideas. I was afraid that I told you, I was afraid I'd get kidnapped, like all kinds of stuff. I said, I don't want anyone to know anything about me. And then suddenly, I sold that business. I was free to go do whatever I wanted. And I started doing some interviews, and I said, why does nobody know about me? Why are they always talking about Neil Patel, and they're talking about Jason Calacanis, but they never talk about Andrew Warner? And I realized, it takes some time. You keep doing these interviews, and sure enough, Jason Calacanis recently had me on This Week in Startups. He said, I see that you're on camera a lot. You've got a nice following, and you know how to talk on camera without freaking out. Come on and do the show. And I've been on there a few times.
Awesome. So if you started out and you were saying how people didn't really know you when you're starting out, how did you get interviews with these big name people without having a big brand or them not knowing about your brand?
Okay. This is a really good one. First of all, there are a handful of people who will just do interviews, not for your website, but for Google.com. They just want that when people do a search for them to have good stuff pop up. And I wasn't going to do a Mike Wallace type interview where I was going to surprise the person and reveal secret information that they didn't want revealed. It was going to be a good interview. So they knew another great Google hit. So that's one reason why people do interviews. The second is there's some people who just love social media and just love being out there. And I pursued those people. Another group are people who are friends of mine. I don't know that you even knew that I had an audience or anything, but we were friends. You said, yeah, sure, I'll help you out. I'll do an interview. With the idea that maybe 10, 20 years, 30 years, I'll be in a position where I'll be able to thank you and repay you. Or maybe your kids will be in a position where I'll be able to repay you through them. I said, I trust it'll come back. There's some people like you out there who do that. And then here's another thing. I was saying that earlier when I said if you're a carpet cleaner, you can still get big names. Like you could even get Martha Stewart. You can get whoever you want. Here's why. Let me see if I can show you this. I have stacks like this. See, look at this. All these books that come out. I'm going to hold up Guy Kawasaki in a second. Here, let me hold up Guy Kawasaki. Publishers now and authors are desperate for publicity. These guys work for years sometimes to write their books. They publish them and nobody cares. In that moment, they are dying to do interviews. When Seth Godin first came to do Mixergy, he was just promoting a book. He had a team of people who were there to help him, do blog relations, schedule interviews with blogs, get their stuff out to blogs, get review copies of the books out to blogs. So they're there to reach out to people like me and the nobody interviewer who's about to start after watching you. You want to reach out to them. And at that moment, you want to reach out to them. And then once you get one of them, you can then go to all the others, all the other big names and say, look, Seth Godin did an interview with me. Can I interview you too? And these guys who admire the people who you're interviewing are going to say, I love Seth Godin. If he said yes, then I should say yes. So here, Guy Kawasaki, I think for years I asked him to do all kinds of stuff, to speak at conferences, to do all kinds of stuff. I think even to do interviews. He was always too busy. Then he published a book. I emailed him and I said, can I do an interview with you? And I promised to promote the heck out of your book. I thought he doesn't like the word hell. He probably likes the word heck. I didn't even really know him, but I said, I'll just make it that simple. He said, sure. He came on. His publishing company sent me a book, and I did an interview with him, and I then afterwards pimped it out to everyone in my audience. He promoted it to his audience, which helped me get a huge following. And then it also helped me get other interviewees. So here's what you do. First of all, you go to Amazon.com, and you see who's the publisher of a book that recently, you can't go 5 years ago, Seth Godin wrote a book, I'm going to ask him about it. You look for who's about to publish a book or who has one that's in pre-order or who has one that just came out. You look at the publisher, and the publishers are always eager to have their names out. In this case, the publisher is, it's going to be, there it is. It's Portfolio. Portfolio Penguin publishes a lot of business books, and so I built up a relationship with them by doing this. I just say, Portfolio Penguin published this. I go online to Google and I say publicity or PR or press and the word Portfolio Penguin. And then I get the email address of the person there who's in charge of publicity and promotion. I say, I'd like to interview Guy Kawasaki. Can you please send me a review copy of the book? Here's my address. Now, of course, this costs them nothing. They want you to have a review copy of the book. They send it out. Then what I do is I go to Guy Kawasaki. And his email address is out there, and if I don't know what it is, I email them and I say, can you introduce me to Guy or who books his interviews? But I get his email and I say, your publisher sent me a book, and I'd like to interview you about it. And the fact that the publisher sent me a book, even if I just cold emailed him, even if I just said his email address is probably guy@guykawasaki.com, or I just go through a bunch of different options, Guy Kawasaki at guykawasaki.com, guy@alltop.com, whatever. I think it is actually guy@alltop.com. But I email him and I say, your publisher gave me a book. That adds credibility. I say, can I interview you about this upcoming book? He goes, sure, I'm doing publicity all these 5 days. Pick a date and let's do it. That's how you do it.
I love that. That's a great strategy, right? Because it's like you got a whole process in place. You go to Amazon, you find the recent books that have been published or are going to be published. You do searches for the publishing name with press or PR. Get the email address. You ask for a free book. Who's not going to give away because it doesn't probably even cost them $1. They send it to you, and then when you email that person, you say, "Hey, your PR agency or your press person gave me a book." Then they're like, "Of course, go on to the interview because if they give you a book, you must be someone of importance and we should be doing an interview with you in the first place." So, and speaking of processes, right? When you're doing these interviews, do you have a process to make sure that the content you're providing is valuable to your audience, right? Because
Yes.
it seems like you're really good at it. Even the information you're giving to me is very valuable. It's like it's broken down step by step.
Here's what I would do. Here's how I would handle this interview, the one that you're doing if I were in your place. First, start off with one big impressive thing. So I would start off not by saying, I'd say, this is Andrew Warner. He's the founder of Mixergy, and I'd have one sentence about what Mixergy is. Then I would ask the guest to say one thing that's really impressive about themselves. And I would even, like, before the interview, I'd ask them about it. So since you care about traffic, you might say something like, hey, Andrew, we're about to start this interview. I'm going to talk about traffic. How much traffic have you gotten? Or do you have an example of one interview that you published that you got a lot of traffic? I want to give my audience a real sense of who you are. And then I go, oh yeah. I published an interview with Seth Godin when I had like 100 hits. The day I published it, or the week I published it, I got 20,000 hits, and I never had that much in my whole life combined on Mixergy. You say, okay, great. I'm going to start that. So you give the intro and go, Andrew, do you have an example of how much traffic you get from interviews? And I say, well, Seth Godin and so on. And then the audience going, oh, he was a nobody. I'm a nobody. He got 20,000 hits from that. I'd like to get 20,000 hits. I'm going to pay attention. So that's the first thing you do. And then the second thing you do, and you did that really well, is you go for tactic example. Tactic example. So you say, Andrew, how do you get, authority for your site? So you ask me that, you ask for a tactic, and then you look for an example of it. People remember examples. If you talk to sales trainers, they'll tell salespeople, don't just, I had a friend of mine who after college went out and got a job selling insurance, like freaking insurance. He had these dreams for what he wanted to do. He was just going to sell insurance. And he was a pretty freaking crappy insurance salesman because his dreams were so big and he was selling freaking insurance like every old like balding dude from the movies that we used to laugh at. And he was doing bad, and then his sales manager told him what just about every sales manager says. Tell people stories. They take it home in stories. So instead of saying we have this great insurance policy that'll be terrific for you, he said, we had a guy who bought an insurance policy for his wife. He was too young to really need a life insurance policy, but he did it just in case, and he knew that the cost was very low because he was so young. A couple of years later, he got cancer. I feel terrible just saying this, and I'm getting shivers. He got cancer. He passed away, God rest his soul, but his wife was protected afterwards. He passed away with this knowledge, not that he was leaving her with all kinds of debt, but that he took care of her and that they had insurance. Anyway, he started telling those kinds of stories, and people didn't think I'm too young. They thought, well, that guy was too young. They remembered it. His sales manager said, people take your message home in stories. And the same thing with interviews. You don't want just facts from interviews. You want the person to tell those stories about the first time that they got a guest, about the first time they got traffic, about how they get people to do it. And you want those examples because it adds authority. The person's saying how he personally got whatever, Seth Godin, Guy Kawasaki, and because people are going to remember it.
No, I love it to death. And going back to your first thing that you pointed out, is there any interview you did that specifically like skyrocketed your traffic?
Yes. I'm so glad that you asked about this because there's a specific kind of interview that I forgot to talk about that I hate to reveal to people, but if I were going to just look for traffic, this is the only kind of interview I would do. The news-based interview. There was a time there where all I wanted was just some traffic, and I couldn't do it. So what I did was I started going to TechMeme and seeing who's in the news and asking them to do interviews and then quickly editing it, not perfect, ugly, but editing it quickly to post it while it was still news, and people started talking about it. So remember when TechCrunch had the Crunch Pad? They were going to, right? They were going to create the Crunch Pad. They teamed up with this company called Fusion Garage, and right? It was big news. I said, it doesn't really relate to what I do, but there's an entrepreneur behind that business, right? I could interview the entrepreneur. I emailed them. I said, can I do this? Can I interview you? Sure enough, he had a PR department. They wanted publicity for this thing. I don't know if I said it, but the news story was that TechCrunch and Fusion Garage got into an argument, and this whole thing blew up. TechCrunch lost the rights to its Crunch Pad. Fusion Garage didn't. It was this whole thing. I interviewed them. I said, can I do an interview with you? They said, yeah, we have this new device. It's no longer called the Crunch Pad. It's called the Juju. And we'd love to have you interview our guy about this Juju, especially if he can show it. I said, if he can show it, of course he can. I did the interview. I don't know how many thousands of hits. I'd say 20,000 very conservatively for that. But it goes beyond hits. It made it to the top of of Hacker News. It got Leo Laporte to pay attention to it, and he invited me to come on This Week in Tech. So it got me traffic, got me reputation, helped me reach a broader audience. At the time, I was traveling through Mendoza in Argentina, and I mentioned it to Leo Laporte. This guy in Mendoza heard the interview, and he said, "I'm a big fan of Leo Laporte's. I have a vineyard here. Do you want to come by to the vineyard?" I go to the vineyard. It was huge. It was beautiful. It's called the Vines of Mendoza. Apparently it's really famous. Ever since I went there, people who've been to Argentina tell me about it. They had this big barbecue that I got to enjoy. They gave me this wonderful wine that they were making there. That's the power of doing news-based stories. If you can do interviews with people who are in the news and quickly turn around while it's news, you're going to get to be part of that conversation. Traffic, credibility, and a broader audience is what you're going to get as a result of it.
Love it. So I know you're a busy guy, so I'm going to end it with one last question. Right? You give us a lot of good information on how to create interviews, put them up on the sites, asking people to tweet about them. After an interview is done, other than the tweeting about them and getting them to link to it, is there any other strategies that you use to drive more traffic to the interviews?
Um, I've been told to use anchor text to give the person the embed for the video and slip underneath it my own link with anchor text. That's been helpful. I use URLs that you showed me are actually representative of what's in the post. I never used to care about that. Um, and I post the transcript, right? You beat me up on this. You said, "Andrew, have a transcript, have a transcript, have a transcript." And after you told me that in the interview, people who heard me said they have transcript companies, and I picked one out of the people who contacted me. I use a company called SpeechPad. But transcripts do help, and you can see that people search for things like here's an example. My transcriber accidentally wrote Ebin Pagan instead of no Evin Pagan instead of Ebin Pagan. Whoever heard the name Ebin, I guess they didn't. So they typed it with a little typo. Now when people look for Ebin Pagan, but they type in Evan Pagan, they often end up on my website. So just because the transcribers didn't hear the word right, I end up getting a few hits for that. And there are lots of little typos that they make, and they just stick in so many words that each one of them is another opportunity for someone to find my work.
Awesome. Well, thank you for doing the interview. Really appreciate it. As you said, you're trying to pay back. You've already done way more than enough for me. And yeah, thank you for having more interviewing.
You bet. I appreciate it.
You. Take care.